I really only had another year of graduate work to get my PhD. And then suddenly it occurred to me that I would really need money since I didn't have a fellowship. And I wondered if I could possibly write a book, not, a meaningful book, a serious work of art, but a book to make money. And through a friend of mine, I found that, yeah, that you could sell a mystery novel very easily. There was a big demand for mystery.
Who was your friend?
A man named Joe Whalen. I think it was Whalen. He was really a friend of my brother's, but I knew him. Yeah, it was Joe Whalen. He he managed a bookstore. And he told me about the big market for mystery novels. And so I started reading mystery novels and hated them because they were all just puzzles, because I was reading the old-fashioned mystery novels. And then Joe gave me a copy of a book by Raymond Chandler. And I read that and realized that this was different. I didn't start with A Big Sleep, which was his first novel. Joe had handed me Farewell, My Lovely. And it was turned out to be Chandler's best novel. And I decided that I could write. So I read everything I could get my hands on that Chandler had written and started writing a novel the story was based on something that had happened to me. A friend of mine had had gotten into a university because she had never graduated from high school. So she used a friend's name, transcript, to get into UCLA. And I thought, God, that's a great idea. That's a great basis for a mystery. Because if anything ever happened to her and someone starts investigating, they'd be investigating the wrong person. So I wrote a novel in the Chandler style. Although my friend Joe read it and said, well, if you think you're imitating Chandler, you're not. Chandler is much more unruly than you are. You're too careful. You've written nothing but plausible scenes. Chandler doesn't. He writes implausible scenes.
It must have been very difficult for you the first time you had to sit down and plot a story, or did you just make it up as you went along?
Well, I had difficulty. I wasn't good at it yet. I finished it, and then it was turned down by Howard Brown, who I brought him out here to become a writer. He was then editing a magazine. He turned it down, but he also said in his letter what was wrong with it.
Was it difficult for you, the act of plotting a story for the first time?
I don't recall that it was, because I think I unconsciously fell into a method of writing that I was unaware of, and that is to get a very good situation. Because the situation was very briefly this, that my private eye, who was my version of Philip Marlowe.
His name?
Philip Marlowe was
your private eye.
Stuart Bailey.
Oh, Stu Bailey.
One of my roommates in college. And I had this wonderful thing where he is hired to find out the girl I told you about, the fictional version of that girl, gets married and leaves the university. And her husband begins to realize that she dropped all contact with the university and wonders why. And instead of asking her, he hires a private detective. And the private detective goes to Portland and finds at the school that girl got a job and so on. And here he is, he's following the wrong girl who has entered that life that Chandler loved to deal with, that upper level life that was a little bit crooked. And, mostly just deceptive. And of course, so that it was a great hook, because he doesn't know that he's following the wrong person. And that person finds out that she's being investigated and gets someone to investigate him or to threaten him and so on. So I had what I knew was a typical Chandler hook. And I didn't think about where it was going. I had an idea who the killer was, but wasn't sure how I was going to get there. And I was just imitating Chandler. I was writing the next scene that worked and that was interesting. I rewrote it as a result of the letter that I got from Howard Brown. And simply, by this time I'd lost confidence because of the first rejection from Howard Brown. And so I didn't send it to an agent, which was a big mistake. I simply sent it to William Morrow and Company because they were the publishers of Earl Stanley Gardner. And they simply bought it. They sent me a telegram saying, this is wonderful, wrote me a letter saying, how could you possibly be a first novelist? How did you learn to do this?
Was it big money at the time?
They told me that they had already sent it to Detective Book Club, which would pay $4,000 for the right to reprint it. Well, $4,000 at that time was worth more than $40,000. In other words, when you had $4,000 in 1945 or 46, you had what today would be over 40 grand.
So you thought you...
So I thought, yeah, I think I can. I think I better stick with this for a year, and get some money in the bank, and then go back to school. I still wasn't thinking of becoming a writer. I was thinking about earning enough money so I could go back and finish my PhD work. And it didn't work out that way.